So welcome everyone. Kat mentioned I'm Bettina. I'm Director of Policy and Open Culture at Creative Commons. So I oversee the Open Culture program and I help facilitate the Open Culture platform, of which this working group is part of. There have been over the past year 7 groups in total. This has been number 2, working group 2, digital community heritage and open access. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, to be able to listen to almost a year's work of investigation, research, compiling, analysis, write-ups, and a lot more. So thank you very much to all the members of the group that have worked really hard to produce a wonderful report. I'll be sharing the link. It's been published on Medium a few days ago. And to thank especially their 2 co-leads, Bettina Fabos in orange on your screen, and Mariana Ziku, who will be presenting the report as well as all the findings. I want to mention that this report has also been translated into 5 languages, and this is an incredible resource for our diverse community. So I wanted to applaud this. I think it's a wonderful contribution to language diversity. So I will quickly introduce Bettina and Mariana before giving them the floor for them to present their report. So Bettina is Professor of Interactive Digital Studies at the University of Northern Iowa, and she's working on Fortepan, which is an interactive photo archive based out of the United States. And Mariana Ziku, who is a research associate in digital culture at the University of the Aegean and co-founder of the Biennial of the Western Balkans. So welcome everyone, and I hand over to Bettina.
Thank you. And we want to thank Brigitte and Kat as well in the CC community. So we're really happy to present this report. And it is the end result of a year-long research collaboration between the 9 members of our Digital Community Heritage Working Group. 5 of us listed on the slide out of the 9 will be here presenting the report. And so I'll turn it over now to Mariana.
Thank you, Bettina. So let me share my screen and we can start with the presentation. So great. So hello, everyone. We are the Digital Community Heritage Working Group, and we are going to present our study. There is a longer version that has been published on PubUp, where we have more information on the study. And then there is also the shorter version that has been published on Medium, as Brigitte mentioned. So I would like to acknowledge our translators who have been translating the short version of the report. It's Dr. Gires Kumar, Liz Oyangu, Rock Hung, and Lucian Lin, Mario Suna Alarcon, who is also a member of our group, and Nicolas Petiot. So we thank them a lot. And I'm going to hand over for the report introduction to Marie-Claire.
I'm going to keep this quite brief because the important bit is that we look at the data we collected through the survey. But we came together as 9 of us from 3 different continents, which is quite nice for everyone involved. And we want to look at where community heritage and digital community heritage created spaces online, and what was available and how this was facilitated. Now, this was not an exhaustive research that we were able to perform because we're not aware of every project. And when we did do calls for projects to contribute to the list, we're not going to be everywhere all the time, unfortunately. So there is scope for this being revisited at another point. And then the problem was so redefining the scope of the concept. So it was not only what projects existed and what was available, but we also needed to redefine what community meant in digital spaces. And so we defined it roughly as, could you skip down? It's defined roughly into 3 different distinct groups. Can I just get them? Yeah, there we go. So this was that we had sort of an interdisciplinary approach from, was it self-identified? Did we identify it? Was it identified by theme? And there's much, much more in the pub one, because that's much longer. So we're able to like flesh it out. So there were community-driven initiatives led by the communities themselves and their members. Community-fueled initiatives. So where GLAMs kind of went in and went like, oh, we're focusing on this. So you could kind of see it as having more support, technologically speaking. Then we had community-oriented initiatives, and they're mediated by institutions, but they're usually around a certain theme. So this was quite an important element when we then looked at the material and how we were able to break it down. So the key statements from it was the community related heritage brings accountability, so that sources need acknowledgement, especially in reuse cases, because they need to have the tools where they can put their own history on the map within the context of creation, and doing it themselves allowed them to do that. So that was great. That community heritage and digital community heritage especially allowed for representation to be rebalanced in the digital space, because otherwise you're just going to get the same types of things in. So heritage publication increases awareness and ownership. I think we kind of hopefully knew that, but it was nice to have confirmation through this action. And that community, through practicing digital community heritage online and through publicizing it and publishing it, that information and their knowledge was expanded upon. So that through technology and learning different technologies, they're able to maintain, disseminate, and keep practicing those community heritage initiatives online. So that was really good. And that's kind of where we went from for the methodology. And without further ado, Ngozi and her methodology. Well, our methodology, but she's going to present it.
Our research was focused on online initiatives where community members or users contributed to a community heritage-related common cause. We released a multilingual public survey. This was to collect international digital community heritage theses. The languages were in Arabic, Espanol, French, Fulani, Greek, Magyar, Persian, Polski. The essence was for participatory inclusion to get best practices. This is in addition to desktop research taken on by the working group members. We also created a typology of 10 categories to sort the various types of digital community heritage initiatives. These were citizen science, community science, common-based peer production, folksonomy, joint curation, social art practice, participatory data governance, digital action, community archiving, other community heritage models. We found 2 overarching categories of community types with subcategories each. One is power of place, where the bounding based on locality and further categorized into city, region, and country. Another was on power of commonality, where we bounded around a commonality and further categorized into cultural interests and practice. Then the multiple communities was added for initiatives that serve more than one type of community. Openness. This is the focal point of our research. We included and tracked 3 overarching categories. We allowed user contribution, the use of open license, and the inclusion of open source software tools. We do not want to lose anything. So we allowed everything open here. The user contribution is a note about user contribution category. We deployed a simple grading system to assess the degree of openness. This we did by categorizing user contribution into 3 types. We allowed public contributions such as tagging, transcribing. We also allowed for public upload, which included the ability to upload original artifacts and resources. We allowed public collaborative involvement, which provided the highest agency and autonomy based on the ladder of participation. Thank you.
And thank you, Ngozi, for the recording. So we are going to present now the analysis, making sense of the data. So based on the methodology that Ngozi presented, we gathered from the public survey and desktop research around 60 initiatives, which were filtered down to an indicative list of 27 initiatives, rejecting some double entries and finding initiatives that were really focused on digital community heritage. So we compiled the data in a spreadsheet that we are going to share as well in the chat, the link to access it, and model them machine readable, the data. We prepared research questions and performed data analysis, exploring the data and rendering visualization. So let's have a data insight into our digital community heritage initiatives. And with that, I'm going to move over to my software. These are some Tableau software visualizations. So we can see a simple categorization on the digital community heritage, so that most of the categories fall in. So as we see, most are community fueled and less are community driven. And so most of the initiatives are not created, are not developed within GLAM institutions, so they are non-GLAM. There are some initiatives that lie in between, and a few ones that we found that are GLAM initiatives, GLAM initiated, and so. Yeah, so the next visualization is about a combination of categories. We can see here, for example, that non-GLAMs, as we saw, form the most populated category, and from that there is a part of them which are community-driven, whereas as we see in GLAM-initiated initiatives, there are no community-driven initiatives within that. So, and then we can see also if the initiatives are platform-based or more project-based. And here we see that in the in-between category, this is a category that has projects where this is a type of a platform, let's say platform format, and they lie between GLAMs and non-GLAMs, community-driven initiatives. So in that sense, we can find here more platforms than projects. So we move on to our next visualization. We're not going to present all the visualizations that we created. However, they can be found in the interactive data visualization links that can be found in our presentation, which we're going to share at the end. And here we can see a bar chart view with a number of overall initiatives within each digital community heritage type. And we see, for example, here that out of the 5 community-driven initiatives, only 1 is open for creative reuse. Here we see that from the 14 in general community-fueled initiatives, 8 are open for creative reuse. And here from the community-oriented initiatives, only 3 are open to creative reuse. So here is a timeline of the number of initiatives assorted to the year each initiative started. So we can see that the red marks represent no longer active initiatives, which are a few. And most selected initiatives started in 2009, 2014, and 2021. let's move over to the map view of the number of initiatives and their distribution on the geographical map. So we see most initiatives are based they are based in Europe. We can see an aggregated view here. And there are some that are based in North America, 8 entries, and in Africa, 3 entries, South America, 2 entries, and there's also one in Asia, in Israel. So we can see also an aggregated view of the typology and the number of initiatives there is in each category. So most initiatives fall under the citizen science crowdsourcing type, as we see here, 18 entries, followed by community archiving, and followed also by participatory data governance and folksonomy, which has 7 entries each. What would be interesting to see, however, is this type of view. This is a case-by-case view combining some fields here. These initiatives are presented in 3 stages of openness based on hue gradation. So dark blue indicates the most open initiatives to creative reuse, and light blue the least open. The list includes only initiatives that are open to creative reuse, so some initiatives have been dismissed. As we see, the majority of the initiatives that are here and that are most open to creative reuse are actually community fueled. So this symbol here stands for community fueled. This is for community driven. And yeah, as we see, based on that, we combined also, based on the pop-up video, you can see the insights, the data insights. So this indicates that we have gathered all these 3 insights on openness. So open to creative reuse, what is the type of creative reuse, if they are open, like really open for liberal creation and reuse, or if they are open for limited reuse. Based on that approach, we created also a case-by-case view combining the fields of starting year and their overall openness scope. So we aggregated the fields of user contribution, or open license creative reuse, and open source software, if they also use open source software. So all initiatives that score high in openness, as we see, the blue bar indicates that, the dark blue bar indicates that they are, usually they have started earlier in time, as in 2011, 10, and 15, also 9, of course, where initiatives that have started more recently, 2019 to 2022, are not extensively deployed in terms of openness yet. And we are going to close these data analyses with another case-by-case view, which probably offers the most, the bigger picture of the 27 initiatives that we gathered. So these combines the our 10 category typology field and the overall openness spectrum of the initiatives. So we can see here the aggregating the fields of user contribution, of open license creative reuse, and open source software. So the initiatives are presented in order from the most open overall, top to the least bottom, in combination with 10 category typology. So the categories that we see that include the most open initiatives are citizen science crowdsourcing initiatives, folksonomy, joint curation, and community archiving, whereas the remaining categories seem less open. So based on that, I'm going to slightly go over all these initiatives. I'm going to insights and to Bettina.
Thanks. So all these data visualizations helped us come up with 3 insights. into successful digital community heritage initiatives that we want to share with you. So insight number one is that community engagement is often very successful when either place or commonality are taken into account. And in the early 2000s, as many of you can recall, when GLAM professionals were beginning to launch community outreach initiatives, and there was much excitement about the wisdom of the crowd and crowdsourced tagging and the development of highly coordinated communities to help institutions make sense of their collections and exhibits. Very exciting stuff. However, GLAMs were sort of disappointed by the low turnout. People weren't joining. Why weren't people joining in? And now 20 years later, we have found out, and we have found and analyzed many digital cultural heritage projects that demonstrate deep public engagement because they connect to the public's own lived experiences. And we identified two main areas, place and commonality to this regard. And of the 27 community heritage initiatives we analyzed, more than half, which is 15 of the 27, were oriented around place. And we found projects oriented around a single country like Ukraine, Chile, Hungary, Israel, Nigeria, Estonia, Denmark, or were linked to a larger region like the French part of Switzerland or a US state, or they served a particular city like Rotterdam or a neighborhood like Harlem, New York. And here are two examples. Topotek and Fortepon are two cultural heritage initiatives that offer communities the digital infrastructure to self-organize at regional, city, or even village levels. For example, a community may initiate a Topotek archive for any town or village. As we see on the left, the small Austrian town of St. Nicola has its own Topotek community platform. And likewise, any version of the fortepon.us archival platform can be embedded into the website of a local heritage institution. For example, to the right, you see the Fortepon platform filtered down to the small town of Washington, Iowa, and then embedded inside the Washington, Iowa Public Library's own website, thereby giving them ownership and claim to their own community heritage, even though it's connected through the mothership. Initiatives like History Pin and reporting wildlife crime allow community members to participate at the extreme local level, sharing microhistories about a specific place they know well, like a street corner or a forest on the map. And the upside is that places are really important. Place is really important. Local history matters to people and connects directly to their lives. Another important categorization for a successful cultural heritage project is the power of commonality. A third of the 27 digital heritage initiatives we examined are oriented around a shared common interest, a common culture, or a shared practice. For example, shared common interests here include HIV, textile patterns, and industrial archaeology. And a common culture might include the next slide, sorry. A common culture might include the indigenous inhabitants of, sorry, I'm one ahead, Mariana. There we go. A common culture might include the indigenous inhabitants of a region in Chile, or Jewish devotional practice, or Dutch history. And shared traditional knowledge and intangible heritage practices might involve traditional medicine or the cultural practice of boat building. And not surprisingly, we found a natural overlap between communities of commonality and place. For example, Queering the Map is a great project that collects specific common experiences mapped to specific locations. So overall, engagement in digital cultural heritage initiatives depends upon personal experience with a topic and a passion to promote this topic for the public good. We also gained insights from those initiatives that encourage and enhance community agency. The most successful tended to exist outside of GLAMs or work in the liminal space between GLAMs and communities. Of the 5 initiatives from our list, that fell into the community-driven category all operate very much outside of GLAM institutions. We found them interesting in that they all aim to represent diverse and underreported communities. They are incubators of community agency, and they are harnessing really interesting software and digital capabilities. For example, one really impressive non-GLAM community-driven project called Patrimonio Mapuche de Pucan digitizes their own community artifacts in 3D and uses traditional knowledge labels. So these community-driven non-GLAM projects involve community members who are really invested in promoting their own community heritage. Another important insight in terms of enhancing community engagement is the role of collaborative platforms, which exist in between GLAMs and community members, and Mariana indicated our in-between category in some of our data visualizations. It was a bit of an aha moment for us. So we ended up calling these in between because they are in between. And these initiatives all fall into the community fueled category. And they involve, all of them, historical photos that are all connected to place. These collaborative portals have emerged over the last 10 years or so, and they are all offering some of the most digital innovation of all the projects we investigated. So we call them in between. They serve as an important link between GLAMs and the public. And our third and final insight is about inspiring openness in digital community heritage. We found that the majority of initiatives most open to creative reuse are also community fueled. And they tend to be grounded in crowdsourcing, folksonomy, joint curation, and community archiving. These initiatives, many of them cooperative portals that operate in between GLAMs and communities, invite both crowdsourced uploads and tagging opportunities that fuel the archive's holdings, while also encouraging users to play with the content, either by downloading it or repurposing it through in-house applications developed for engagement. And an example of that would be the really cool RePhoto application within the Ayapaik archive. So these initiatives also tend to be the most involved in developing original software applications, not surprisingly. We also noticed that the more recent cooperative portals initiated in the last 4 years or so are less open than the ones that have been around for about a decade. And we're wondering about this. Is it because fully fledged openness among digital community heritage initiatives is declining? Or is it that it just takes longer to set up initiatives that are more open? So this is one of our research questions that is unresolved. We want to direct you to our list of good practices in open access policy and open access, open source software, which are listed in the longer report. So if you go to the longer report, you can find a category, a subhead that's called good practices. And I hope you check out these projects. And now Jacob will take us through some final points of our discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, if we can move to the next slide. Amidst all this exploration of openness in all its form, we did occasionally fall back on the discussion of not being open also being okay, which I think is important to discuss, especially in a lot of contexts. Kind of the closer you get to specific communities and contexts, I think the more easy it is to realize scenarios in which this discussion needs to be had. And it's come up also in some CC webinars around things like traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge. So I wanted to touch on it briefly before opening up the discussion if anybody had any thoughts or questions. I think that a lot of the question around openness or sort of closedness of information and data at the community level, I've found in my experience and a lot of the projects that we've discussed, it often comes down to a lack of proper kind of communication of information regarding intellectual property and rights. That so not being open is very okay, but at the community level, I've often found that it just it can be as simple as having a very frank discussion about what open access means and how it can be qualified. So I think it's an important first point to note, which has come up a lot in my personal research in Greece. And something which has come up in contexts more of indigenous knowledge is this difference between information and knowledge, things that can be shared freely and things that either should be qualified or protected in a certain way. So one great example of that is the traditional contexts labels and kind of a qualified form of openness, where you might have knowledge that is either only accessible under certain conditions, even at certain times of the year, or under other kinds of qualifications. So we found that was a great example of how to break it down for very place-specific applications. And I wanted to share a really brief example from my own work, in which we compiled a digital herbarium, basically a research on plant knowledge and plant biodiversity on this island called Syros, which is a project called Anthemis. You'll see in the next slide a kind of a screenshot from it. And what that did is it let various different community stakeholders through a kind of a citizen science approach, document plant biodiversity in 7 different locations around the island, and then supply their own data and kind of stories, almost human stories, around those same locations. And we very quickly came up against this kind of protest from some botanists on the island, who are basically like, well, there's a lot of plant varieties that you shouldn't tell everybody where they exist. You know, these rare orchids that if you tell people they're right here on this hillside, people will kind of stampede over and try and pick all of them. So we kind of had a lesson there ourselves in realizing that, yeah, we want to make it open, but there are certain things that, for even kind of biodiversity reasons, need to be protected. So yeah, I mean, I was curious of people who have been listening as well, if any other examples, or if that sparks any ideas, whether people agree or don't in their own institutions, communities. Examples.
I can just add something that I'm working with Indigenous communities right now, and working on explaining how the Creative Commons works. And it's just really a wonderful process, and dealing with local context labels and helping them control the platform as well as we can make them control the platform. So it's just it's amazing when you can start steering the tools that you create so that they become flexible and adaptable to the needs of various groups. So.
Yes, thank you, Bettina and Jacob. And if I can also add another element that we recently found, another a policy, it's a policy brief actually from the Indices European project, which is measuring the impact of digital culture. And it's a policy brief that is related to community-focused cultural heritage institutions in the digital realm, which is also an interesting finding. So I would like to also say that there will be an event in March where we are going to present our working group report as well. And by that, we would like to thank you, and maybe try to go on with the questions that also Jacob put in the discussion, and would like to share the presentation as well. It has been uploaded on Zenodo, so you can find it there, but the link of the digital object identifier is not active yet. Probably it will be in 1 or 2 days.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Bettina, Mariana. But along that, Mary Claire, Jacob, and everyone else who participated in the working group, and Ngozi, obviously, and I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. It was really a wonderful work, so rich in so many different stories, and yeah, you could tell that every case is unique, but at the same time, some common threads emerge on how digital community can be preserved in an open way. I'd like to open for questions. Are there any questions from the audience for the group?
I also wanted to add, I don't know what, oh, I see, Susanna has a question. Very briefly, do go ahead. One slide we also glossed over a bit was that one aspect of our report was a survey of open source software tools, which is a list which, like all of the report, I think we sort of consider it a first step, and it's not in any way exhaustive or complete. It's really kind of hopefully an invitation for people to keep adding and complementing it. So another parallel question I think would also be, you know, what might you add to this list? What blind spots might you identify in the software tools that we surveyed? Because there certainly are some. But yeah, Susanna, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yes, thank you very much. It's such a rich resource and such a great treatment of that wide field. Well, I'm very practically oriented, and I wanted to ask you what kind of obstacles you see specifically. Well, I'm thinking about sharing on Wikimedia platforms. Well, here we are talking about different platforms, but we are also talking about the content that they produce, and they either can traverse to other platforms or not. But and thinking about sharing publicly on Wikimedia platforms, where do you see the bottlenecks, and do you see any cures? And whether it's, you know, it's in your focus in general, you don't have to start inventing.
I mean, I think that there's definite signs that community groups are figuring things out, and that there is a connection in working, you know, with GLAMs and this pretty exciting group of projects that are kind of existing outside of traditional archiving practices, and yet they feel the strong need to preserve local heritage, and they're doing it, and they're building these tools and stuff, and we think that more people should know about those tools. And so whether we can integrate them, and I think we are starting to, into the Wikimedia platforms, I think that's exciting too. So it's, I think, just about people talking together and sharing, and, you know, creating these lists that we're trying to create so people know about how to use these tools and how to apply them in different ways. I'm hoping that this is a hopeful time for these projects, and that GLAMs can kind of prick up their ears and say, okay, well, there's something happening there that we can now either work with that collaborative platform or that indigenous community that has got this great 3D thing going, and somehow embed their work and link to their work, or you know, create just more communities of practice where we're sharing. Yeah.
In a way, I also, sorry, just a short comment. In a way, I also read that, you know, you can share some of that information further rather than all of it. So it's a kind of an in between.
I think also, Susanna, there's not, sometimes the Wikimedia community and the community groups, they might not have that good contacts with each other. So it's not necessarily about them sharing, it's about them being aware of the scope, like how far they can share things. And sometimes the community project is just so focused on the community. It's not looking at the wider, and also the sort of headspace from what's the difference between Wikipedia and Wikimedia. And I think that's, I'm sure you've encountered that in that space. So it might also be the list of projects, which is not exhaustive, would be a good starting point for the different countries' Wikimedians to actively seek them out, because they might have limited resources and time, and Wikimedians might be more interested in helping them further that. Like, they might not be adverse to doing it, it's they might not be aware that they can. So yeah.
Very good points. Thank you.
Yeah, and, Susanna, if I can add to that, based also on Marie-Claire's remark, how open we can share, I would say that our obstacle also was to create a kind of a simple way for a grading system to scale the degree of openness. So there can be a degree of openness certainly for sharing it through conformant open licenses, but then there are also other dimensions that we try to capture, and as also Jacob mentioned earlier, the open source tools, and also as Bettina said, so it's the open source software and tools, and then we try to create a kind of a simple grading system, but the question is open how to assess the openness spectrum, like in a standardized way, maybe. There are different tools there, and of course there are different also principles, standards, but what we tried to do in our last data analysis approach was somehow to gather all these together and have a bigger picture on the openness spectrum. So
I will say I'm very happy to have done this project because it introduced me to all these cool initiatives that I had not heard about. And so it's really inspiring me to start reaching out to the projects that are most like my project, and to create like a consortium where we can talk about the same problems that we're having and why we're doing this, really, you know, what successes are we having, and you know, what motivates us to serve community members like this. So I'm very rewarded by this experience, and I just feel like I made a big step into a very I don't know, like empty knowledge. I feel like I know so much more now, and can join the conversation in another level. So I really appreciate first all the team members that worked with us, but also just the insights that came out of this are really helpful to me personally, and I hope they're helpful to a lot of people. So
Go ahead, Isaac.
Thanks. My question is going to definitely echo what Bettina just said. Wanted to start off by congratulating you all on this work. This is really groundbreaking. It's so cool. And I think you've done a really great job of breaking down all the components that are really important to these organizations and kind of how they're functioning, and seeing how they're all going through similar things. So my question really, the list of these institutions and organizations is just incredible. And I'm curious to know, as you've connected with them and they've been made aware of the Creative Commons and resources like that, have you seen any interest in their part in seeking resources or help from your team, and also just in the combination of knowing that these other groups are out there, have you seen any kinds of collaborations between organizations or institutions that may not be related at all, but they're really interested in each other's projects?
I can answer that just quickly. I have a meeting in 2 weeks with a group that I discovered through this research called Notre Histoire. They are based in the French part of Switzerland, and they have this incredibly lovely project, and we're gonna, I think, collaborate because our software is a little more advanced than theirs, and I think that they're gonna take our open source software and use it to power their project. So it's like music to my ears. I'm so excited to be able to you know, take the work that we're doing and bring value to some other project across the globe. So I hope there's more of these kinds of collaborations. And one of the things that Mariana and I were, and all of us in the report were talking about, is that sometimes those of us who make tools don't do a very good job either promoting them or identifying their openness in the GitHub area. And so I think that we can do a better job me included, our project included, and it was kind of like a wake-up call. And so we're just encouraging maybe to have some kind of standard way of listing tools that are open, that are, you know, serving the GLAM community. I think that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, if I can add as well, to what Bettina said, that this was really enlightening for our initiatives as well. Many of us have some community science initiatives, so it was nice to see how, as the study, as the report evolved and our working group discussions, we went back and forth to our projects as well and corrected certain parts of them, making them more open. For example, one that was really interesting to notice is that some of the initiatives, they shared their open source software through GitHub, but then didn't include any license in the description, right? So basically it is practically open. However, it is not really reusable since there is no license attached to it. So what we did was we contacted some of the projects and platforms and asked them also about if they have any code out there. So it appeared that some of them really had uploaded their code, and of course they thought that it was open, but then we referred them to the licenses and to including some licenses there, and some of the initiatives also did that. So it was a reciprocal process.
If there are no more questions, maybe someone else would like to ask one last question before we close off. Last chance. I don't see any. So I think we can take these last moments to give you another round of applause. Congratulations on this immensely useful report. And as Ngozi said, I think it should be shared much more widely. So a small step in that direction will be that we'll publish a blog post on the official CC blog that will summarize all of the working groups into one blog. So we'll have links to this recording, we'll have links to the long and the short version of this report, and we'll try to see how we can promote it further. If you have any more ideas of how we could help to ensure more dissemination, but also, I guess, ultimately more collaboration based on this incredible resource, please let me know, and we'll work on that to make sure that this project lives on as it should. So once again, thanks to everyone, to all the speakers, to all the participants who listened, to Kat again for getting up so early and making this webinar possible. And I hope to see you all very soon.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.